We talk about mental health awareness a lot, but like, what does that actually mean? Like going a little deeper,
Right.
And luckily we have this great article from BetterUp. It's called Mental Health Awareness, The Importance of Conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And we're gonna really dive into it
I love it.
because it's got some really interesting points.
Yeah, this article is great. I mean, one of the things that I think is really interesting about it is how it really reframes the conversation a little bit. We always talk about acknowledging mental illness, which is obviously hugely important, but I feel like this article really shifts the focus to like actively cultivating mental fitness.
Yeah.
As a path to like a more fulfilling life.
Totally, and it starts with that awareness piece, right? And they start out with this really kind of like shocking statistic, I think, which is that nearly 1 in 5 adults in the U.S. experience mental illness.
Wow.
Which is a lot of people.
That's huge.
Yeah. But you know what? This deep dive is not just for those people.
Right.
It's for everybody, right?
Exactly.
Because we all have mental health,
Absolutely.
just like we have physical health.
We do. And just like physical health, you can be generally well, but you can always, benefit from strengthening certain areas.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where this concept of mental fitness comes in, which we'll talk about more. But
Totally. Okay, so I want to kind of back up for a second and really unpack this idea of mental health awareness, because a lot of times people throw it around and it sounds good, right?
Right.
But like, practically speaking, what does that mean?
Practically speaking, yeah. I mean, the article really brings up a good point, which is that it's about sharing experiences.
Yeah.
It's about, really combating stigma by being open.
Yeah.
It's like taking those conversations that maybe used to be whispered in, like hushed tones, and like bringing them into the light.
It's like giving people permission to talk about it, right? Like
Exactly.
Because I feel like for so long,
Yes.
it hasn't been okay to talk about it,
No.
which I think can be really damaging, especially for those who are really struggling, right?
Yeah, and in fact, for a lot of people, even receiving a diagnosis, which I think can sometimes be seen as a negative thing,
Yeah.
can be such a relief
Really?
because it like gives a name to what they're experiencing.
Oh, it validates it in a way, right?
Totally. And I think it's also like connecting the dots.
Yeah.
Where, you have all these maybe symptoms or feelings and you don't know how they all fit together. But then when you get a diagnosis, it's kind of like, oh, okay, this makes sense now. I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
And then you can actually seek out, effective treatment and support.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're giving a voice to this thing that
Yeah.
maybe you've been carrying around internally.
Right.
And even just the act of saying it out loud, the article talks about, can actually be therapeutic in and of itself.
Absolutely. Speaking up, whether it's to a therapist or a trusted friend, or even through journaling, like that can be incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
Because I think, when we hold things in, it creates this burden on like our minds and our bodies.
Totally.
And so expressing those thoughts and emotions, however you choose to do it,
Yeah.
is a really crucial step towards, healing and growth.
Totally.
And the other thing too is like, the more we normalize these conversations, the easier it becomes to advocate for our needs.
Yes.
Whether it's at work or in our relationships or even just like in our healthcare.
That's a really big difference.
It creates this like ripple effect, right?
Totally.
So it's like your individual conversations then contribute to this larger, more supportive and understanding society.
100%.
Which I think is really cool. And that kind of brings us to this like key distinction that the article makes between mental health and mental fitness.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they're not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
Right. So how would you kind of define?
Right. So it's not just about addressing illness, but it's about, being proactive and building strength and resilience.
So it's more than just being mentally well. It's like actively building up your mental fitness.
Which is kind of a cool concept when you think about it. Like,
Yeah.
what does that even look like? So give us the good stuff.
Yeah, the article actually uses this really great analogy of, you can be physically healthy overall, but you could still like benefit from a solid workout routine, right?
Totally.
Mental fitness is kind of similar, where it's about strengthening your resilience and your coping skills and your emotional intelligence. It's about being like prepared for whatever life throws at you.
Okay. That makes sense. So how do we do that? Are we talking like meditation apps and like mindfulness journals? Give us the inside scoop.
Those can definitely be helpful tools, but the article kind of breaks it down into 3 main strategies that I think are like really actionable for anyone.
I love it. Okay, what's number 1?
Number 1 is actually pretty simple, but it can be surprisingly powerful. speak up for yourself.
Okay.
And I don't just mean necessarily sharing your struggles, although obviously that's a huge part of it, but it's also about setting boundaries and advocating for your mental well-being, particularly like in the workplace.
Yeah, I feel like especially now, it's like go, go, go all the time, so
Yeah.
it's hard to.
It's so easy to like just keep pushing yourself and feel like you can't take a break.
Totally. But I did like that they were talking about how we need to kind of normalize the idea of mental health days.
Yes,
Like,
it should just be as acceptable as like, oh, I have a cold, I need to take a day to recover.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like your mental health is just as important.
Yeah.
And it deserves to be treated that way.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? I think a lot of times people, they know that they should speak up for themselves, but then they're like, well, how do I even do that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Totally. And that's where I think it's really helpful to remember that like, you don't have to have it all figured out, right? There are resources available to help you, whether that's a therapist or counselor or even a career coach. Like those are people who can equip you with the tools and the confidence to really advocate for your needs.
Yeah, and it's so true because I feel like so many times we just assume that everyone has it figured out but us.
Right.
But the reality is like,
Everybody's struggling with something.
yeah, everybody needs help sometimes.
Exactly.
Which is a perfect segue to their second tip, which is to actively educate yourself about mental health
Yeah.
and mental fitness,
Yes. I love that they emphasize that because it's not just about, diagnosing and treating mental illness.
Yeah.
But it's about understanding how to proactively take care of your mental well-being.
Yes. And, there's so much information out there these days.
Right. It's overwhelming almost.
Right. And it's like,
Which is why
I didn't even know.
Yeah, which is why it's so important to really like be discerning about the sources that you could.
Right.
So don't just like take everything you see on social media at face value.
Totally.
Right? Look for information from
Yeah.
like reputable organizations like NAMI or
Yeah.
explore books by experts in the field.
Oh, listen to good podcasts.
And listen to good podcasts. Exactly.
Like this one.
There you go. But no, I do think that that's such an important point because it's really easy to get caught up in. Like, I don't know, like the latest TikTok trend. And be like, oh, I need to do this.
It's so tempting to look for those quick fixes, but mental health and mental fitness are like, they're a journey, right? It's not a destination.
Totally. And it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, it's about, really taking the time to educate yourself from those reliable sources so that you can make informed decisions about your own well-being.
Yeah. And then the third tip, this one kind of surprised me, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is seeking support from a coach.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
I think that's a good one. I think it's interesting because coaching has become so much more mainstream in recent years, right? Where it's not just for like athletes or CEOs anymore. It really can be valuable for anyone who is looking to, improve their mental fitness. So
I think a lot of times people think of coaching and they think of it as like almost like a friend who gives you a pep talk.
but this is like more than that.
It's more structured than that, right?
Yeah, it's like a professional coach.
It's more like, think of it like a personal trainer for your mind,
Yeah, okay.
where, they help you set goals and identify obstacles and
Yeah.
develop strategies to, strengthen your mental resilience.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like having that objective person there who can kind of help you like navigate the ups and downs of life.
Totally. And hold you accountable too,
Yeah.
which I think is huge.
Yeah. Because sometimes, even when we know what we need to do, it's hard to actually do it.
It is. It's so easy to get in our own way.
Totally. So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, but before we move on, I kind of want to pause for a second and connect this back to, like, you, the listener. Like, why should you care about mental health awareness? Even if you're like, I'm good, Like, I'm doing fine. I don't,
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's a good question because
Mm-hmm.
I think the answer is actually bigger than just, individual well-being, right?
Yeah.
It's about the impact that it has on, like,
Yeah.
our relationships and our workplaces and our communities.
Yeah.
Like, mental health awareness is not just about, me as an individual feeling good.
Yeah.
It's about contributing to this world where everyone feels supported and empowered to prioritize their mental well-being.
Totally, totally. And I like how you said that because it really is about, I feel like so often we think about it as like, well, I just need to take care of myself and I need to do my thing.
Right.
But it's like it actually
Take
affects.
people out, yeah.
Yeah, it does. And it affects the people around us.
And I think, one of the most impactful areas where we see that is in the workplace, right?
Totally, yeah.
Like imagine a workplace where mental health is something that's openly discussed, where it's okay to, take a mental health day without feeling judged.
Right.
Where burnout is addressed proactively.
Yes.
Like that is a workplace that is set up for creativity and collaboration
Yeah.
and ultimately greater success.
Totally, because I feel like so much of the time it's like you're just supposed to like,
Pretend like everything's fine.
yeah,
Yeah, put on a brave face.
and just keep going. And it's like, no, we're all human. We all have good days and bad days. And, acknowledging that.
And creating that space for it,
Yeah.
I think, is hugely beneficial for everyone involved.
Totally. And it's not just about productivity either, right?
Right.
It's about fostering like genuine human connection.
Yes, totally. Because at the end of the day, mental health awareness is really about like cultivating empathy and compassion and understanding on a societal level, right?
Totally.
It's about creating this world where it's okay to not be okay,
Yes.
and where like seeking help is seen as a sign of strength, not weakness.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
Right.
Yeah. And it all starts with these conversations, right?
Hey, wait.
Like it starts with us normalizing this idea that like mental health is important. It's something that we all need to prioritize and talk about. Yeah. Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive. But as always, I like to leave our listeners with a little something to ponder, a thought to kind of carry with them.
I'm ready.
So the article that we talked about today really focused on like the individual benefits of mental health awareness. But I think it would be interesting to think about like, what about the ripple effects?
Yeah.
How might increased awareness and these open conversations that we're talking about, how might that contribute to a more innovative,
Oh, wow.
a more compassionate, more resilient society as a whole?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
It is. It's something to think about, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, keep those conversations going. And remember, taking care of your mental well-being is a gift to yourself and to the world.